Hello, welcome back. Today we're doing another installment of how to build a blank aesthetic wardrobe series, and today we're talking about woodland goth, which is kind of another subgenre of goth. And I know the goth subculture is very rich with history and culture, so we're barely scratching the surface here. And if I get anything wrong, or if any of you who are more active in the goth community have more insight, feel free to share it down below in the comments. So if you're not familiar, woodland goth is an aesthetic that combines the dark and romantic aspects of goth with light subjects like flowers or woodland animals. It has been recently revived by internet culture, but it's existed since the 80s. And it actually goes back to the myth punk subculture, which refers to a subgenre of mythic fiction in which classical folklore and fairy tales get hyper-poetic postmodern makeovers. Much of the myth punk subculture draws inspiration from 70s and 80s dark fantasy writing, including works by the authors Angela Carter and Tanith Lee, and it is characterized by baroque, multicultural fashion, bold sexuality, bizarre retellings of familiar fairy tales, pervasive anxiety, fear of inevitable change, feminist parables, the brutality of humanity, the dark price of magic, surreal imagery, a twisted sense of humor, elaborate symbolism, and radical reinterpretation. And then there's a subgenre of this subgenre called elf punk, which is a subgenre of urban fantasy in which traditional mythological creatures such as fairies or elves are put into semi-modern, often punk or goth-inspired urban settings. And this is definitely closer to woodland goth. And I think woodland goth is a super cool aesthetic. I always talk about how much I love dark and romantic aesthetics, so this fits right in there. And if you're familiar with goblincore or fairycore already, you'll find that there's a lot of similar visual elements to these aesthetics. It also has a lot of similarities to dark Morikei, or even like a dark version of cottagecore. So you'll see a lot of imagery of fairy tales, folklore, ballet, poetry, and mythology, in contrast to the stereotype of vampires, zombies, and horror movies that you would see in other alternative and goth aesthetics. Now, the aesthetic itself has existed as a facet of goth music and fantasy literature and film since the 80s. It can be seen in death rock's fixation of Greek mythology, ghosts and angels, and in Britain's Batcave scene. Susie and the Banshees also moved to a more mystical and dreamlike quality in their music, both lyrically and visually. Brian Froud adopted gothic visuals for the movie Labyrinth, and Bauhaus wrote the song Hollow Hills in reference to Brian Froud and Alan Lee's Fairies. And Terry Winling's Borderland anthologies and Emma Bull's War for the Oaks were a hybrid of fae mythology and proto-goth imagery. So the movement was well around during this time, but the term woodland goth just had not been coined yet. The woodland goth aesthetic tends to feature dark, dreamlike, and natural imagery. You'd see things like misty forests, moons and stars, 20s theater and ballet photos, moths, unusual insects, swans and wings, bare trees and twigs, thorns, underwater, blurry images, stained glass windows, glitter and shimmer, dancing figures, black cats, and candles and old lamps. In terms of fashion and outfits, they often resemble a dark or ghostly type of fae with a punk or goth twist. It's also inspired by Shakespearean figures and Greek gods. You can see a lot of contrasting dark and light tones, jewel tones like dark reds, purples, navy blues, and moss greens, faded pastels like pale pink, and neutrals like ivory, gray, and black. You'd also see a lot of layering like mini dresses over long skirts, and tattered or handkerchief edges or asymmetrical hems. And of course, because of the nature inspiration, you'd see a lot of floral or botanical prints. Next, I wanted to talk more about what items specifically to look for to build up a woodland goth wardrobe. For tops, I would look for flowy, billowy sleeves or flare sleeves, sheer or lace materials, hooded coats, a Henley top for a more masculine look, especially those ones with lace-up ties. And I just think any top in that color palette would work. You just kind of want to focus on the flowy silhouette of the overall outfit. For bottoms, I would look for skirts, especially gothic Lolita-esque skirts with petticoats underneath, long skirts, including tutus, tiered or layered skirts. Pants in the same color palette would work as well if you don't want to wear any skirts. Harem pants or looser wide leg pants would be really good for that flowy silhouette as well. For accessories, I'd look for nature-inspired jewelry like floral jewelry or animals, fairy and goth-inspired makeup with dark jewel tones, pink, purple, or green eyeshadows, makeup inspired by Nina Hagen, stockings or leggings, often lacy ones, draped scarves or shawls, parasols, fans, fingerless gloves, and wild or messy hair. For shoes, I would look for lace-up boots or knee-high boots, something you'd see in a foresty outfit, something practical. Platform shoes like velvet or suede platforms, or even ballet flats or Mary Janes. I finally want to talk about a few places to shop for this aesthetic. First of all, I always recommend thrifting. It's the most sustainable way to shop and typically the most affordable way to shop. So I definitely recommend thrifting. I think you can find a lot of basics there. Just look for some dark clothing in that color palette and some flowy silhouettes, and I think you can go really far with thrifting when it comes to this aesthetic. Another store you can check out is Disturbia. They have a lot of floral prints and dark, edgier alternative styles. You can also try Killstar or Noctex. They aren't as focused on like that botanical floral print, but they do have darker alternative styles as well. For dresses, I recommend checking out Of Her Own Kind. They have beautiful kind of dark cottagecore dresses that could fit this aesthetic, and they just look so well made and pretty, and I really want to buy one of these one day, but they are on the pricier side, so keep that in mind. Alter PDX is another option with really pretty dresses and clothing in general. They're not focused on alternative styles, but they do have options that I think could fit this aesthetic, and they are a sustainable and plus size inclusive brand, and I definitely recommend checking them out anyways. They are a little bit on the pricier side as well, but you can use my discount code DRESSRELIEF for 10% off. Minka London is another good option. They have clothing for a bunch of different aesthetics, so you might find some stuff that could work for this aesthetic as well. They have kind of fairycore inspired lines, so those can definitely translate into the woodland goth aesthetic. And then finally, for accessories, I definitely look at Etsy. I love finding accessories on Etsy. They have a lot of options. I would try to search for like nature inspired jewelry and accessories, maybe some like fingerless gloves on there. Just look for specific items there, and I think you can find what you're looking for. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned a little bit about the woodland goth aesthetic. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have more insight. Like I said, I'm not super involved in the goth community, but I'm sure some of you guys are, so you might have more insight, or you might be able to correct me if I got anything wrong. But you can also check out the aesthetic wiki page, which I used for a lot of my research. I'll link that down below. And you can check out my Discord server as well, where we can talk about anything and everything fashion and aesthetics. We have channels for different aesthetics. We have a channel to talk about new aesthetics you find, a channel to share your DIY projects. You can talk about really anything related to fashion there, so definitely check it out and join. And follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you guys next time.